This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, we've packed a number of shows together to give you some highlights. I know you're going to enjoy the show. Thank you for being with us today. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Our guest today got fired from his, quote, dream position. He was fired. He had won awards. He was pushing himself in this position and loved it, but talks about how he was sat down in a Starbucks one day and was let go. And wow, this pushed him to take charge of his financial future. He's going to go through how he did just that. You're going to hear, I loved how many things he laid out are very practical. From the questions he asked a potential mentor that built a relationship where now they're in business together and growing an amazing business because he took so much action. You're going to hear that. We hear people talk about adding value to somebody to mentor with them, but we don't always hear how they did that, right? Or some practical ways that you could do that today. And he lays that out. Also, he's going to go into how he got into the syndication business and started raising money so they could scale legally and do that well. You're going to hear that. And then we're going to do a second interview that's going to lay out many more things about his business where he's creating layers of insulation around a potential downturn, like to protect his business. Their business strategy is a little different than, say, multifamily syndication or self-storage syndication. They're doing things differently. They have a different business model. And I appreciated, just the things he laid out on how, and they're preparing for another 2008, whether it happens or not. I love that thought process of being prepared for it. And he's going to lay that out. His name is Brandon Cobb. He was a former sports medicine medical device sales rep before becoming a licensed GC in Tennessee, managing $16 million or more of new development annually and active ownership in $33 million in commercial real estate. He's the owner and partner of HBG Capital and was featured on the cover of REI Wealth Magazine, Reality 411 Magazine, and has been quoted and published in Forbes as well. Brandon and I had a great conversation. I know you're going to learn a lot from the interview with him today. Brandon, welcome to the show. It was an honor to meet you in person a few weeks ago at a conference that we were both at, both striving to grow our businesses, right, and learn from some of the best in the business and just doing things the best we can, right? But it's helpful to learn from others who have gone before us, no doubt about it. And I love that you're doing that. I knew you'd be a great guest. It was interesting. You knew that, hey, I was supposed to be on your show soon. And so it's great to connect. Honored to have you on. Give the listeners a little bit about your specialty, your niche, and let's dive in.
Yeah, Whitney, it was an honor. And the real estate world really is a lot smaller than you think it is. I appreciate you having me on today. So when you've got some capital sitting on the sidelines, but you're worried about the next recession and your main focus is building a legacy and capital preservation, what we do is we target investments where it's designed to be insulated against market volatility. And how we do that is unique. We look for unique opportunities where there's a good runway in the event that something's going to happen. Right now, we think that there is a very unique opportunity in building affordable housing, not to be misconstrued with like Section 8 or government housing, though that is its own thing, but first-time homebuyer products. You hear it on the news every single day. There is a housing shortage, and it is a housing shortage of those product types that people can get into that have a combined income of, blue-collar working class families. And that's what we want to focus on. But before that, rewind. Once upon a time, I was a medical device sales rep. I was slinging shoulder and knee products, really loved what I did. I thought I made great money. I got to wear scrubs. I thought that was really cool. It was my dream job. And then one Friday, I got promptly sat down at Starbucks and fired. I had all the trophies of the sales awards. I won like Rookie of the Year award. It was a huge shock. And that moment really taught me that, you can be as loyal as you want to a company. You can work as many hours and perform, but at the end of the day, the company's got to do what's best for them. And for whatever reason, they made that decision to let me go. So I really learned that I was going to be the one taking charge of, my financial future. I couldn't depend on a big organization or corporation to do that. So jumped into single family, started flipping houses, started doing some wholesaling, cut my teeth, used all my own money, ran out of my own money. Real estate does a really good job of sucking all that up. Scratched my head, said, hey, we've got to figure something out here. So started taking a lot of the profits and just reinvesting it back into myself. The business made a lot of hires, join a lot of masterminds, try to get in those rooms with people who are a lot smarter than me. And, when you do that for 6-7 years straight and reinvesting in the business and yourself, something wonderful can happen.
Awesome. No, that's some great points right there I want to jump into. And, you mentioned, your dream job, you were fired. It just blows my mind. And we talk about it so often on the show, but it still just blows my mind how we are all taught to, feel like that's security, right? That job, you had the dream job, you were wearing the scrubs, you were receiving the awards, all those things. And then you're still fired. You're still let go. What a kick in the face, right? I mean, for lack of better words, but obviously that motivated you. I think it's so easy to get depressed at that time, right? And almost lay down for a lot of people and quit. And I'm thankful that, you took it as almost a kick in the pants, right? To take charge of your financial future, like you said. What was it about real estate though? Were you already looking into real estate? Were you already thinking that way? Why was it that, I had this dream job, in this profession, but then we just completely pivoted over here to this other thing?
So real estate wasn't my first venture that I set off. Many failed ventures before that. I had a motivational blog. I was a big Tony Robbins fan. I wanted to do that. I had a course that was built to help people break into medical device sales. I had multiple other things, a coaching business I was trying to get off its feet. All those failed. Honestly, real estate was the first one that took off. When you get fired and you're not really sure what the next leg of your life is going to look like, take massive action and do a lot of different things, and just whatever starts working first, cut out everything else and just focus on that thing. And that's what happened. I was networking, going to a lot of meetups. I knew that, hey, I had this advice, go find a mentor, the same thing we've always heard. But I was like, all right, I'm going to find him, and then I'm going to add as much value as humanly possible to this human being. So I found him at a meetup, and I ask these questions whenever I'm networking and I'm meeting people and I'm engaged in a conversation. I ask them, what are you trying to do? What are your goals? Where are you trying to take your business? What are the biggest obstacles that are preventing you from getting there? And what do you need? And what that does is it gives me a little bit of ammunition, so that when I can go figure out what that thing is. And for this particular person, he had a huge portfolio in Colorado Springs. His girlfriend was living in Nashville, and he wanted to start his business here. And his specific need was he needed some boots on the ground for deal flow. Like, he had the secret magic sauce formula. He needed somebody who was gung-ho about going out and doing it. And I was like, well, I can do that. I don't know anything about doing this, but I'll figure it out. I had the sales background, so that was really good. That enabled me to be able to talk to these motivated sellers and answer the phones and do everything you need to kind of get things out of its feet. But that's what I was really focused on, was adding value to him. And I did that by figuring out what he needed. And I was very aggressive about going out and getting him what he needed. And by the way, that guy's still my business partner to this day. We've done hundreds of deals together, and he runs the whole construction side of things, and I raise the money and I find the deals. It's worked out beautiful.
That's awesome. I love how you laid out even the questions that you asked there. I love practical things like that the listener can take and apply today. But many failed ventures, you said, but then you knew that you needed to find somebody that was already doing this or was already successful in some way, right? And add value to them. Can you share that? Because I hear that often. I know listeners hear that often as well, like adding value to this mentor, right? Can you share maybe how you added value to him? I love the questions that you asked to give you some ammo, right? What are your goals? Where's your business going? What do you need? And yes, hopefully that shares enough to you that you can go do something, right? What was that you did with this gentleman?
So I asked him, I said, so you need deal flow? He said, yes. I go, how do you do that? He goes, easy. Here's what you do. And we created these lists, right? It's your typical, house flipping, wholesaler list, your absentee list, your evictions list. And I had to go down and figure out how to get these lists, right? Not very easy to go down to the circuit courts and figure out how to pull detainer warrants of people who are evicting tenants and pull their information, right? I did all that work. Then I figured out how to automate it because I figured out you could do it online and hire a VA. But he was giving me the secret sauce. He said, look, you want to drive these neighborhoods, and here's your app you use. And every time you see a home that has really high grass, HVAC unit sticking out of the window, the roof falling in, you're going to click on it, and it's going to build a whole list of these properties. And we're going to start mailing these properties. He was paying for the mailers. So in a 5-week period, I drove and collected about 5,600 properties all over Middle Tennessee. I can honestly say that I've probably, without a doubt, driven 90% of the roads at one point in time in Middle Tennessee, just collecting all these different leads. So we had the lists built, and he's like, now, we need someone to answer the phone. So he had the system set up. It was a call rail system. I was like, yeah, I'll answer the phone. Just, what do I say? And so he had a script. And so he had some of the systems built out. He knew what to do because he had a portfolio in Colorado Springs. He just needed someone to execute. And I was very, I think I was 26 at the time, very young, very motivated, would do whatever it takes to get the job done. And I was just solely focused on delivering what he needed. So those were some of the things how it evolved. And then it evolved into so much more. We figured out where my limitations were, which was Brandon is not a project manager. He should not be in charge of building new homes. I can say that I've built a new home. I completed it. I'll never do that myself again. I've got a great team that does that now. But learning where my limitations were, he really stretched and pushed me, and we had a lot of fun. And we figured out where the right butts in the right seats were. And that's when things really took off.
That's awesome. I love that, how you approached him, and like in a short period of time, you collected 5,600 addresses. So, quickly you showed him that you were serious, right? That took a lot of work. That took a lot of time, dedication to make that happen, driving that many roads. But also you learned a lot through that process. I love how he was so willing though to say, hey, Brandon, here's a script, or here's how we do this, or here's the next steps you need to do. And then you went and did it, right? You went and performed, and ultimately you built a relationship through that, right? If you hadn't been somebody that was going to go after it and just grab the bull by the horns, right, type mentality, well, he would have been able to see that probably pretty quickly. He would have been on to somebody else, most likely, or just pushing his own business. But man, he saw talent in you, no doubt. So I just love that example, because I want the listener to be able to figure that out, right? For that mentor, that person. We talk about it so often. Man, get a mentor. Find somebody. It doesn't have to be a paid mentorship. It can be somebody just like Brandon found that already has all the systems in place. And man, they just say, hey, here's what you do. Go help me do this thing. Love that. So you started flipping then, wholesaling. Was that with him?
Yeah.
Okay. So you all started that business and you ran out of money. Were you syndicating then, or tell me about, you started flipping, wholesaling. When did syndication come into the picture?
Yeah. So we did not start syndicating until we have learned and failed. Gosh, I joke that people ask me, when did things start going well? I said, well, at one point you failed so many times, the only decisions that are left to be made are the right decisions. You're going to run out of wrong decisions eventually. We did all that with our own money. We grew it up where we were doing 40 plus house flips a year. And we had done some accidental new construction projects where, you come across like a tornado damaged home or a fire damaged home, and you're buying it for less than what the land is worth. And you're like, okay, what if we just cut out all the stuff that's black and burnt, get a structural engineer, get the city out here, make sure that, we're covered, and just, frame up. So we'd done a few projects like that. So 7 or 8 projects, kind of onesie twosie over the years. And then we just noticed that the market was shifting. We could no longer, make 40, 50 grand a home on a $250,000 house. It was like $25,000 to $35,000 on a $350,000 house. Much smaller margins. And everything that we do is designed to be able to insulate risk. And I didn't like these 8, 10, 11, 12% profit margins. I like the 20, 25% profit margins we were getting, 4 or 5 years ago. That was drying up because the market was getting too saturated. And so we kind of did a pause, and the light bulb went off there. We literally built a house faster than we were rehabbing a house. I kid you not. We had this full gut rehab, and we built this home in like 6 months, and we were rehabbing this other one. It took like 8 months. And that's when the light bulb really went off, when we realized, wow, the margins are about 3 times higher on these new builds than they are on these house flips. And if we can do it faster than we're flipping houses, why in the world would we do that? So we wanted to make sure that we were vertically integrated. During this time, we were trying to cut costs as much as possible and, reduce the interest rates that you're paying. And in order to do that, you ultimately need to self-manage. And so we had this great sales arm that was built out, had a great brand. People were selling us their land, selling us their houses. But then we had the issue with contractors. Everybody has problems with the GCs, and all the good ones are really, really busy. So we got our general contractor's license, self-managed everything, reduced costs, decreased the timelines. and pivoted over to doing just new construction. And everyone's heard of this term called blue ocean, right? Red ocean versus blue ocean. Man, when we pivoted over and just started doing new construction, all of a sudden we had more deals than we could ever fund. I mean, it was the whole opposite problem that we had in the house flipping world, where you're going on 10 appointments and getting one deal, and you're talking to 30 people to get, one deal on the phones. I mean, the whole machine built. We were talking with just a handful of people because we were very laser focused on our approach, because we knew the areas that we really wanted to be in, that were doing really well and having a lot of appreciation. And when we pivoted and we started doing that, all of a sudden, boom, we had more deals than we knew what to do with. So naturally, we ran out of our own money, right? Which stagnated growth. And we built these houses, and we're like, man, what do we need to do to really take off like a rocket ship? And that's when we started syndicating. That's when we started bringing investor partners into the deal, giving them great returns, passive income. They're getting 3-week updates, complete with all the photos and video walkthroughs. They really loved it. They're recommending their friends and family to us. When we were able to pull our own funds, out of these deals and use it to hire people, invest in, the coaching, bigger builders who are doing bigger, better stuff than us, and investors could come in and get a piece of the deal. That's when we started syndicating. That's when things really started taking off.
Incredible. Love that. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Well, most of us, if not all of us, have heard horror stories about the 2008 recession, right? And what happened. Many of us don't really understand maybe what actually happened and how that compares to today. Well, our guest today, and he had a real estate business and it was growing, it was thriving. And then 2008 happened and the worst happened to him. He's going to walk through that, and he's so transparent about it. I'm so grateful to our guest today, Kevin Bupp. He's going to tell you about how he got started in this business, even how he found this mentor, and about their relationship. I feel is so beneficial to any of us that are getting started. But even as you grow in this space, he's going to tell you even about some different asset classes, an example deal that he's going to walk through. I think that was very beneficial as well. He did such a good job at that. But then also just being real about the crash of 2008 and how that affected him and how he's looking at deals differently now and how he's been conservative. But what does that actually mean? We hear a lot of people say that. What does that really look like when you're underwriting a deal to be conservative? And he's going to walk us through that. Many of you may have heard of Kevin before. He is the founder and CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors, which invest in mobile home parks, parking lots, apartments, offices, and single-family homes across the U.S. He has 16 years of experience educating investors to locate, acquire, and create higher than average returns from a widely misunderstood mobile home park investing niche. He shares his expertise through the Mobile Home Academy and also as a host of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, which has become one of the hottest real estate podcasts on iTunes. So Kevin shares many things today. And also I'll go ahead and share with you, he has a new book coming out, and you can find that on Amazon, of course, but you can find it for free. He said at kevinbupp.com/free book. You're going to learn a lot from Kevin today. Kevin, welcome to the show. Honored to have you on. I know you have become an expert in mobile home parks, parking lots, build to rent projects, numerous things in our space. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, Whitney, thanks for having me. It's always good to see you, my friend.
Yeah. Kevin, give us a little bit about, maybe your backstory. I know you've been doing this a long time. You're so experienced. And so tell the listeners a little bit about that, and let's jump into some of your expertise and some of the asset classes that you focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me here, and try to keep this somewhat short. So, I've been a full-time investor for more than 2 decades now. I always joke and say that real estate kind of found me. I necessarily wasn't looking for it, but it came along at the right point in my life. I was introduced to it at the age of 19, bought my first property at the age of 20, and really fell underneath the wing of who became my first mentor. He happened to be dating my girlfriend's mother at the time, just kind of a random story. And he was a local real estate investor where I grew up, Whitney. He was looking back, I guess you could say in the grand scheme of things, he didn't own, thousands of units. He had, I think roughly 40 units in total, 40 doors in total, but that was a big deal to me. And he lived a very different lifestyle than what I lived growing up, and seemingly had a lot of flexibility and a lot of time in his schedule, drove a really nice car, dressed nice, and just, again, was kind of around during the day hours when, my parents were working. So it was really odd to me. But that, now fast forward, we know that being a successful entrepreneur gives you some of that flexibility that you might not have when you're in the W-2 grind. So anyway, I started buying when I was 20 years old. It was initially just following his plan, his model, which was single family. His was single family holds. Okay. So I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. But what I found out really quickly was that I had $7,000. I made that money bartending. I attended bar in the evenings, went to school during the day. And then on my off hours, I basically was working for him for free, around him as much as possible. And then, again, it took me about a year to buy my first property. When I bought the first property, I used all that $7,000 and used a private lender relationship that David had introduced me to. But I realized very quickly that a couple $100 a month of positive cash flow, it's going to take me a really, really long time to buy the second property. And so with literally less than a year into it, I think it was about 7 months, I actually sold that property, made a profit on it, and then really converted my model to more of a wholesale 2-3 properties and then keep one, wholesale 2-3, keep one. And then it got down to wholesale 1 or 2, keep one. I got it to where I had actual working capital and money to redeploy into new assets so that I could build an actual portfolio and not have to take 20 years to acquire 10 properties. And so I did that for many years. I did that for, roughly, I guess, leading up to 2008. Leading up to 2008, I focused on single family. I ended up acquiring about 130 single family rental properties in my portfolio and a few hundred smaller multifamily properties. I felt like I was doing quite well in my early to mid 20s. And then that led us into 2008. And I was down here in Florida at the time. I started in Pennsylvania, moved down here when I was in my early 20s and got absolutely crushed. During 2008, it was a very, very different type of recession than what we're kind of rolling into right now. Florida was a very different economy than what it is today. It's much more diverse in nature. Back then, it was heavily geared towards the construction industry. Lots of jobs revolved around construction. There was a lot of excess building happening, lots of rooftops for populations that weren't here. And so that had detrimental effects when the music really stopped. And so fast forward a couple of years after the recession, I was introduced to mobile home parks. Just by happenstance, like these things, usually happen, and was so intrigued by the business model that I, again, kind of committed that as I went through this rebuilding phase of rebuilding what I had lost, that I was going to do with mobile home parks. And so I went out and bought, it took me about a year to buy the first park after, my initial introduction to them. And that was in 2012. I bought that property up in Atlanta. In fact, I just sold it a little over a year ago. So we owned it for quite some time. And that went really well, and bought the second, bought the third, bought the fourth. And, the story goes on. We ultimately started syndicating about, I guess it's been about 6 or 7 years ago, started actually pulling capital in from outside sources after we kind of ran out of our own. And we own communities in, Northeast, Southeast, and the Midwest amongst 13 different states. And then aside from mobile home parks, we've ventured into a few other endeavors as well over the last couple of years, one being parking. So parking lots and parking garages. And then the most recent initiative is a few build to rent projects in the Phoenix marketplace. So again, just high level view of kind of the last 20 years of my life, but everything has revolved outside of a few other side businesses. Pretty much everything has revolved around being a real estate investor.
Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't know parts of that story about you. And so that's awesome. I mean, first property at 20 years old. It's interesting you found this mentor and it was attractive to you. The way he could live that was so much different than you or maybe your parents or what you had witnessed growing up. But you also mentioned that you worked for him for free for a while.
I did.
Was that beneficial for you? Was that a great time, of education, or do you feel like that helped you to push forward in a big way? Or how would you, say, or how would you talk to yourself now? Now if you had to go back and say, hey, Kevin, you need to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give a little bit more of the background, the story of how that relationship kind of came together. I'd see him over at my girlfriend's mother's house quite often, and we just became friends. And ultimately, within a couple of months, and I don't know what it was. I had never even asked him this question. I probably should have, but maybe he saw kind of a floundering. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. Literally, I was taking classes, just, general classes, not really working toward any particular degree at that time. I was going to community college and I was tending bar in the evenings. I was saving my money. I felt like I was a fairly responsible 19-year-old. I was straight like an arrow, but I just didn't know where that arrow was flying to. And so maybe, and again, I should go back and ask him this question, but at some point he invited me to a real estate boot camp down in Philadelphia. Again, I'd known him for a few months. Him and his business partner had bought tickets to this real estate boot camp, and his partner couldn't go. So he's like, hey, don't know what you got going on this particular weekend. He's like, but I've got a 3-day boot camp that I paid $5,000 to go to down in Philadelphia. Would you like to attend? I know that you're going to school, but this could be something of interest to you, right? This is basically in alignment with what I do for work, whether or not you have an interest in that. And I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of random. They invited me, but heck, $5,000 he paid for this. He's offering, for me to go with him. Yes, I will go. Right. And so I went to this conference and I was overwhelmed. I mean, this was all new. I'd never even read a book. I mean, he gave me some like resources before we went and said, hey, like try to read up on this, learn a little bit before we go there, learn some terminology and things like that. And in fact, it wasn't really books. He gave me like cassette tapes. That was way back in the day, cassette tapes and CDs and things like that. But I went to this conference and I met a lot of people there. There was a few hundred people there. And I met a number of people that were doing, to me, were huge things, people that were, wholesaling 15, 20 homes a year, and now I know guys that do hundreds and hundreds of them a year, but these people were making $5,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 assignment fees, and they were doing, $200,000 plus dollars. And to me, that was such a massive mountain to climb. But these people seemed like just normal people. They didn't seem like they were any smarter than I. They just had a little bit more education and knowledge than I did in that particular topic. And so I left that boot camp just excited. I mean, whenever you go to a conference, I mean, especially when you see new ideas, you learn a new angle on something, you're just excited and you're anxious. And I left there with all those feelings. But what I knew was going to happen more than likely is if I didn't find a way to apply just some of the basics, just, a fraction of the techniques that I learned, do something with it, I was just going to go back to the normal, going back to school, tending bar, and most of it would vanish, and anything I learned, it would just vanish. And so I didn't know where to start, though. I mean, it was overwhelming to me. And so I basically went to him and, I was able to observe him in his business over a couple of months of knowing him. And I realized that he had a few key weaknesses in his business, things that frustrated the heck out of him. And one of the big ones that frustrated him was technology. I mean, the guy, he just struggled on the computer. He struggled with just even simple things like emails. And I saw him put together a PowerPoint one day for one of his private lenders on, I guess, this duplex that he was buying. And it literally took him 3 days to put together probably the worst PowerPoint presentations I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was horrific. It looked like a 2-year-old did it, right? And so I basically presented to him, hey, let me help you in your business. I think there's areas that I can help you become more efficient. All I asked is in turn, let me hang around you. I mean, I'll literally help your day along on the areas where you get bogged down. Maybe it's dropping off a lease. Maybe it's, running to Home Depot, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Let me help you. Technology was a big piece of it. And in turn, just please let me hear how you talk to people. Let me learn what it is you really do. And ultimately, a great friendship was formed there. And I shadowed him for 14 months. And I got to meet his private lenders, go have lunches with them. And we'd meet with other investors. He was part of this little, we didn't have any investment clubs in where I grew up, but he had a lot of other friends that were local real estate investors. So I got to meet them. I got to hear them talk about all the good, the bad, the ugly of being a landlord and just all those incredibly critical and important things as you enter into that business. And so, looking back, I don't know if I would be in real estate today if it wasn't for his mentorship. I had that first little taste of it, but I don't think that I would have actually gone and done anything with that. I wanted to, I just didn't know where to really plug that energy into. And so that truly was a game changer for me. And I, again, looking back and seeing how we kind of handled that mentor-mentee relationship, I think that is absolutely critical for anyone that's getting started. I mean, go find that individual that's already doing what it is you want to do. And I guarantee there's a skill set that you hold, whatever it might be. I don't know. There's a skill set that something that you're good at, they might not be all that great at, to where you might be able to add value to them, bring value to their business and help them grow or help them gain some efficiencies. And in exchange for that, hopefully you'll learn something along the way. You'll be able to ask questions to someone that's been there, that they've done that. They've made the mistakes. They've been through the ringer many times over again. And so, yeah, Whitney, it was a great experience. And I've had many other mentors along the way, but that one right there was the critical step in my, my professional career.
Yeah, I appreciate you just elaborating on that, because I feel like often we're not willing to go seek somebody out like that, or offer to work for free, or just be with that person, right? But you really took the time to figure out so you called them frustrations, and it's a great place to focus when you're trying to help somebody, right? It's around some frustrations, just tech and even just running errands for them. And what a prime time for you to do it when you were 20. Right. Or, around that time or younger, maybe, it's just prime time. So I just appreciate you elaborating on that. Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.